So if I want to make a xaringan presentation, how do I get started? What's the way to do that?
So what I would recommend is because I'm looking at the RStudio IDE, I would say you could go to File and create a new R Markdown file. And then you can, on the left-hand side, there's an option for making something from a template. So I would click that.
So that as opposed to not presentation.
Correct. Yes, because xaringan has a
Okay.
template ready to go. And so from there, you can
Okay.
scroll down. I think xaringan's usually near the end because it starts with an X. And so I would click on Ninja Presentation. That's the standard English version of the xaringan template. And so that creates,
Okay.
yeah, a template for you. That's also the documentation for the package.
Okay. So let me just save this xaringan example. Okay. So at this point, this pretty much just looks like an R Markdown document. Yeah. And so can I knit this just like anything else? Does that work?
You can knit it. Yep. You can also use a built-in function of xaringan that is called Infinite Moon Reader. And that will give you a live preview of your slides as opposed to like the snapshot that the knit button, for example, or knit option would give you, which is what I prefer. I prefer to have the live preview.
Okay. You know what? I'm actually realizing I might need to close this project actually. The knit button. So I'm actually working in the project that I've created, which is a book down project. So when I hit knit, it like
Oh,
is not knitting this document. It's like building, I think it's building I don't know. You can see it made this R without statistics thing.
okay, okay. Do you
I
want to
wonder
try
actually,
Infinite Moon Reader and see if that still works within your project?
oh yeah, yeah. The only thing I'm thinking is it might be good to actually bring it up in Chrome to show like the presenter mode and that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. Although I guess you can do
Mm-hmm.
that here. All right, let me try that.
Okay.
Oops. Um, oh, okay, that actually.
There we go.
All right. Cool. So I have the presentation here, and this is the default. I'm using the arrow keys to kind of go through slides. Cool. So it looks like it just has made an HTML document for me. Now you mentioned that you also like the Infinite Moon Reader, which is an add-in here. And so when I run that, it actually is showing it here,
Mm-hmm.
as well as actually it popped up. You can't see this, but it popped it up in my browser as well. So I have a preview of it there, like a live preview
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm.
it. Why do you like the Infinite Moon Reader? What is it about that you like?
I like that it reflects the changes that I make in the slides. So if you were to change, yeah,
Mm,
any title or something, you could change that and then save the document. Um,
oh,
and
I see.
so, yeah, so that's a nice feature to have, I think. Um, yeah.
Cool.
And you can actually use that function for other HTML documents outside of xaringan. But I mostly just use it for slide making. Hmm.
So you're saying you could get a live preview of a document that, you're just knitting to straight HTML and that would
Yeah, my
work.
understanding is for most R Markdown documents, it'll work. I think there's very specific times when it doesn't work. Like I think if you have a website, like a blog down website or something, then it won't work. But a standard R
Mm,
Markdown document, I think you can use it in a very similar way. Hmm.
cool. Nice. So let's talk about some of the unique pieces of this. Maybe we'll come back to the YAML in a second because there's definitely some YAML
Hmm.
here that is probably useful to discuss. But what are some of the things that are different in terms of the R Markdown that people might not be used to
Hmm.
seeing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So some of the things that are new that are in the R Markdown document that are kind of specific to Sharingan because of the remark.js that's running in the background, sort of, would be, for example, on line 22, there's 3 question marks. And the 3 question marks separate the content of your slide from your presenter notes. So where it says on line 24, image credit, and then there's a link, that would not show up to your audience members, but that would show up to you in presenter mode if you had that enabled.
So if I'm in the slides and I hit P for presenter mode, there we go. Now I can see that there, which is handy. And that's actually like PowerPoint, if people are familiar with PowerPoint, similar. Okay, great. That's helpful. What else is different?
So where you have the cursor right now on line 26, there's 3 dashes, and that's what separates one slide from another. So when you're getting ready to make a new slide, you would enter 3 dashes, and then anything below that would start in the new slide that you just made.
So if I go like 1, 2, 3, and then I go new slide. Why is it not updating? I'm wondering. Oh, you know what? It is. Hold on. Let me stop because it was showing it externally. I'm wondering if it was only updating there for some reason.
Yeah, I do think that if you have it in a browser, if you open it up externally, that becomes a default place where,
Yeah, I've had that
yeah,
happen.
same.
Okay, so I can see, and actually I'll say, I love Infinite Moon Reader. The only problem is if I have a really large presentation with like a lot of code, it goes really slow. That's my only problem that I have with it, but
Yes.
that's
Yeah,
separate.
yeah, I hear you.
Okay, cool. So I've added a new slide here, and I've added my text. So that's those 3 dashes. And I know, just speaking from personal experience, one thing, what is it? So I added 3 dashes and then a space. In the same way that our Markdown in general is very particular about spacing, adding that space there, and you're like, why is that? It's created a horizontal line as opposed to a new slide. That's often what I've seen
Oh, that's
going
a good
on
one.
here.
I haven't run into that yet, but now I'll know.
Okay. I'm trying not to throw in too many editorial comments, but I see that all the time. So, cool. What's this class center middle? What's that about?
Yeah, so Sharingan comes with some built-in CSS classes. So the CSS, again, is what styles the slides so that it's not just boring HTML. And so the built-in classes that we see on line 27 are center and middle. And so center places the content of your slide in a center. So it's like either left justified or right justified or centered. And then the middle class places the content in the middle of the slide vertically. And so that's why we see sharing and hello in the middle of the slide and centered. And there are other classes that you can use, but those are the ones. So like on line 38, for example, we see another class in there, which is inverse. And so that has other properties attached to it. In this case, it's creating the inverse slide, which has a dark background and light colored font.
Cool. So if I took that, for example, and copied that here, now my slide that I made before will be inverse, will be centered, and then vertically in the middle
Exactly.
as
Yeah.
well. Cool. What about, I noticed down here there's some sections with not 3 dashes, but 2 dashes. What's that about?
So Sharingan has the option to do incremental reveals of content within a slide. So sometimes you don't want all the content to show all at once, but you might have some bullet points. Maybe you want to focus on the first one, move on to the second one, and so on. And so you would separate those pieces that you want showing up at different times with 2 dashes. And the different pieces would show up as you move through the slides with your arrows. arrow keys, as you're moving through the slide, those pieces will show up. But yeah, 2 dashes separates those components that you want to reveal as opposed to just have ready to go.
Gotcha. And so that's why, for example, here it's a little different now because we're previewing it and it's only showing me wherever my cursor is, but it's just showing down to here. It's not showing click the knit button to compile it until I actually get down to that point.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's kind of, in this example, the slide is filled with content and there are 3 bullet points that are being incrementally revealed.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like 3 slides put together. So you're still moving through the slide deck as you would if it was a whole new slide, but instead of it showing you a whole new slide, it's just showing you the additional information.
And let me actually, so I'm going to actually bring it over here just just to show people, like I'm clicking right button or down, and that's going on to not the next slide, but the next point on that same slide using those 2 dashes. All right, I think I gotta start it again.
Or maybe closing
freeze my RStudio?
the window, the knit window. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Okay. Cool. And so you talked about incremental slides. So I'm assuming I saw up here this count incremental slides equals false. Can you talk about what that, because that's not a YAML, anything I've ever seen in YAML in other formats. So what's that about?
Yeah, so xaringan's got a lot of different things you can tweak in the YAML that are specific to that package. And the one that you just pointed to on line 13, count incremental slides false, that option means that when you have a slide like the one you were showing with the 3 bullet points that were being revealed incrementally, if count incremental slides is false, then I guess the slide number in the bottom right corner that appears by default won't count each of the bullet points basically that you're adding on as separate slides. And so it just means that it'll continue to have the same slide number on the bottom, regardless of whether you have incremental content on it.
Gotcha. So if I change this, for example, to true, and I go back down here, so if I'm at this point, let's see, now it's showing 7 of 45, now it's showing 8, I see. Whereas before it would have just been still at 7 for each of those incremental bullet
Yeah,
points.
and that makes it really helpful if your audience wants you to go back to a slide, for example. It would be just more helpful for them to tell you, oh, it's slide 8.
Slide 9. Right. That makes sense. Okay. A couple other things that I noticed here are about highlighting. So I'm assuming I can highlight lines. What is that? What does that YAML option do, and how do I kind of implement that highlighting of lines?
So sometimes we might want to show code in our slides for whatever reason, maybe for teaching purposes. And so you might have a code chunk that you want to show in your slides, and you might want to, well, I guess the first part is that you can use one of those options in the YAML to choose what you want the code to look like. So the one, line 11 says highlight style, and then it specifies GitHub, and that just applies GitHub styling to the code that you're seeing. And there's other options like Google is another one, Solarize is another one. And so you can get to choose what your code chunks look like. And then on line 12, yeah, let's change that and see what it looks like.
So here, for example, now I have code and it, well, it looks different, although people might not remember what it actually looked like before. So let me change it. You said Google was another
Google's
option?
definitely one of them. And it'll look a little bit different.
This is something I've never actually done.
Doesn't look different.
Let me switch to GitHub. Maybe is it just the highlight style?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I was looking at my slides earlier from something else that I used Google, and there wasn't anywhere else where I specified that. Okay, yeah.
Okay, interesting. So well, it looks like with the default, I don't actually know if that's the default, but with GitHub, it puts that kind of gray background and makes it kind of red. Well, this part red and these parts black. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Another portion of it here was allowing us to highlight
Mm-hmm.
lines. What's that about?
Yeah, so within a code chunk, maybe a code chunk has multiple lines of code, and so you really want to draw your audience's attention to some specific lines of code. You can use, I believe the syntax is hashtag and then left caret left caret. I think that highlights that particular line. Yeah,
I see.
and you can use that. You would use that syntax on any line that you wanted highlighted in your code, specifically in the code.
Cool. Yeah. Awesome. And so obviously, if this is set to false, I assume that that doesn't work. Is that the idea?
Oh yeah, I mean yeah, I guess so. I've never actually done that, but yeah, I would assume.
I've never done it either. Whoops. Let's see.
Mm,
Yeah, I see. So then it just shows up. It doesn't evaluate that as I want to highlight this line. It just shows the actual
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
text. Okay, cool. Um, so let's talk. I noticed right down below on this slide, there's this background
Mm-hmm.
image. Um, Obviously, the name kind of says what it does, but do you mind just talking about how that works to apply a background
Yeah, so
image?
if you want a background image because you don't want, a plain white background or the inverse background, you can point Sharingan to a specific image, whether it's a URL like the example on line 16. There's a URL function that points to a specific image hosted online, or you can have that point to an image you have stored locally. And so a good practice, I would say, if you're making slides, is to make a little image folder right next to your R Markdown, wherever you saved your R Markdown file, and you can save an image in there, and then you would indicate that file path in that URL function.
Great. Let me actually show an example from something else that I'm working on. So let me close all these. These are slides for the R in 3 months program that we're in the middle of. So for example, here are slides that we made for a session yesterday, which will look really similar to what we have before. And so we have an images file where all of the images, so for example here, well, this isn't a background image, but this is just actually putting an image in the slide. It allows us to just grab something straight from the images folder as opposed to having to get them from a
Yes,
URL.
exactly. That's exactly how you would use it in the other presentation too. And you can control the size if you're using background image, you can control the size of it and the position.
Yeah,
Yeah, like you have in that example where line 76 specifies that they want the position of that image to be 50%, 50 by 50. So, halfway down the slide and then halfway over. And then there's another option you can use. What is it? Background size. Yeah, and that can be, yeah, there's some keywords you can use.
so
Cover,
cover.
and there's also contain, and what's the other one? I feel like there might be one more.
Those are the two that I
Or you could
think
also
of.
just specify, like if you had a specific size that you were looking to, a specific size of that image, and you could also
Oh, really?
specify, yeah, in pixels, or I think you could even use like
Uh,
50% or something like that.
yeah. Okay, cool. So we're starting to get into ways that you can, by default, Sharingan gives you like a pretty plain template. But we're starting to get into ways that you can make things look good. So we've talked about background images. We've talked a bit about aligning content. So for example, on this slide, using class center middle. Can you talk about some other ways that you can align, maybe not necessarily the whole slide, but like if I want to align specific pieces, how that
Yeah,
works?
so if you wanted to align some text, for example, you could use the built-in classes of left and right, for example. But the way you would specify is you would surround the content with square brackets, and you would write, I guess it'd be more specific. Yeah, before the opening of the square brackets, you would write dot, like a period, and then you could write left if you wanted the content in the brackets to be on the left. And then just like that, you could also specify that you wanted the content on the right-hand side, and you would use the word right instead. So dot right, and then open square brackets. Yeah, so in the output, the preview is letting us see it already, but yeah, you can see that the text that you wrote, which says this is text on the left, is pulled to the left-hand side, or left justified, and then the text that you put in the dot right square brackets is on the right-hand side. Yeah.
I see. So this, just to be clear, is about justification of the text. Like it's not actually creating columns, is that right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. There are ways to create
Okay.
columns, and you would use other types of classes for that. So you could use dot pull dash left to pull whatever content you have in the brackets to the left-hand side of the whole slide. And then you could
Okay.
use dot pulled dash right to create a column on the right-hand side for the content that you put in those brackets. And these are nice ways to align
Gotcha. So
content. Yeah.
I see. So the difference here is whereas this didn't actually make columns, it just aligned the first bit of text on the left side and the second bit of text on the right. And that's actually also why it's one line down, because it's kind of coming after. This actually just puts things in two separate columns. This stays on the left. This goes in a right-hand column, but it's still left. We haven't done anything in terms of the alignment. It's just left aligned within that right-hand column. Could I even do something like that?
Yeah, to nest classes, you absolutely can. Yeah.
I see. So if you want to right align something in the right-hand column.
Yeah, that's a really nice
Cool.
feature too.
Awesome. And I've done this just with text, but like you can do this with images too. So
Or
like,
code chunks. Yep.
cool. So let me try just using some Markdown to add that image. Did I not do that correctly?
I think so. You just have an exclamation point, square brackets.
I wonder if there's something with the right.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe move the image code so that it's okay. Yeah, you could try that too.
Whoops. Let's see if that.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like it's not finding the image.
Hold on. Let me just grab. Just grabbing a different URL to see if that.
Okay,
There we
great.
go. I don't know. Somehow I didn't like that SVG. So I changed the image, and now we have that in that column. And like if I did the same thing, for example, I could have two images, or like you said, you can also have code or anything else that you want to have and put them in those
Yeah, popular
columns.
configuration is like code on one side and then its output on the other side. That can be a nice teaching tool. I see that a lot. Yeah, or a table
Okay.
or something.
So, all right. Well, let's actually do something then. Let's actually make a like a table, say, and then we can actually like show the code that's used to make the table. So I'm just going to make a new slide called table. Oh, I didn't put it in a new slide because I only did 2 dashes, so I'll do 3. Okay, so I'll just do, oops, Palmer, penguins. So if I want to make a table, like I could do, I'll use the GT package and I'll load Tidyverse. So I could do penguins. And then, well, if I do GT, actually, I don't need to run it here. Just save that. And so then I get my table here. So let's say I don't actually, I just want to share my results. So I'm going to do echo equals false, same as I would in any other R Markdown. So I'm just showing the output of this code chunk. Cool. And I've got a table.
Yeah, which looks,
And obviously I could
yes, you could
style
style it.
it.
I was going to say that in this situation, because you use GT and GT produces HTML tables, then it just works seamlessly into these HTML slides.
Awesome. So talk to me about how, like you said that people a lot of times will use the kind of pull left, pull right to do like demos of how they make something. What does that look like? Like talk me through the
Okay,
process of creating
so
that.
what I would do first is, well, you have your code chunk ready starting at line 61. And so I would put brackets around the code chunk since you already have it there. And I would use maybe pull left like we practiced before.
Pull left.
Yes. And if I wanted to, yeah, let me think through this. Yeah, let's make another placeholder for the stuff that's going to go on the right. So use the class pull right and create those brackets. And so I have to remember there's some little tricks you can use with the code chunk name so that you're not having to copy and paste the same code chunk. But just for the sake of this example, I would say go ahead and copy and paste that code chunk and put it into,
Okay.
yeah, your pull right class. And then you would show one of them, right? Whichever, if you wanted it to be on the left or on the right, then you would.
Okay, so now, so, obviously in addition to tables, we can make plots. So for example, I have some code here that is just creating a plot. And so if I do include equals true on this, and I'll change echo to be false. I got it to work. So I have made a plot, not a very pretty plot at all, but again, like the example or the advantage of doing this in our Markdown is if you have code already written somewhere else, you can just reuse it in a presentation and make any of your tables like we showed or any of your plots.
Yes.
Yes, of course. Well, I mean, the thing with making presentations, even if you're doing it in PowerPoint, there are other ways that it ends up taking a while where you're like futzing with getting everything
Yeah,
in the
that's
right
true.
position and whatnot. This takes care of a lot of that. And so, as I think anybody who watches this knows, like writing code takes a while and getting things to work can take a while, but it does have some huge
Agreed.
benefits as well. So we've talked about a bunch of things. Let's kind of finish off by talking about ways we can customize this to make it kind of, reflect like the organization we're working for or just our personal style. So when you think about things like customizing fonts or colors or that kind of thing, what there are a few different ways to do that. What do you typically like to do in order to do that?
These days I would probably use the Sharingan Themer package, which is a companion package for
Okay.
Sharingan designed by Garrett and Bowie. Yeah, I think that's a nice way to customize without having to write CSS yourself. It kind of does it for you, but you get to decide what colors you want, what fonts you want. So I would probably take that approach. Do you have that
Okay.
installed on your machine?
That is a good question. We'll find out. Um, no, hold on. Sorry, I should have done this before. I got a new computer not too long ago, and so I keep
Mm,
having moments like this where I'm like, oh wait, I forgot to install that. So I will just install that package. Um, okay, so themer. Okay, so, and to be totally honest, I haven't actually used Sharingan Themer very much. I just know about it and know that it tends, from what I've seen, looks a little bit simpler than the alternative, which is writing custom CSS, which I know for many people
mm-hmm,
coming to R, they're like, I'm not a web development person. I
mm-hmm.
don't know CSS. Can you provide an easier solution for me? But if people do want to use CSS, they absolutely can to customize things
Yes.
however they want to. And the slides that I showed before, I
Mm-hmm.
customized with CSS. But let's talk about Sharingan Themer and how, so for example, if I want to change the font, what's the best
Okay, so
way
the
to do
first
that?
thing we'd want to do is actually tweak the YAML a little bit so that we can tell the YAML where to look for the CSS file that Sharingan Themer is going to make for us. And so I have these notes written down
Okay.
here. So it would be at the same level as libdir or nature in the YAML. So on line 9, there's that indentation, so make another, yeah, right there, you write CSS colon, and then you would write Sharingan Themer .css, I believe is what it is. I think
All one
Sharingan
word
Themer are separated by a
like
dash,
that.
actually. Yeah. Yes. Okay. And so it's not going to find the CSS yet because we haven't made one. But in the code chunk where that starts on line 17.
Oh, but I can already
Oh,
see it's
yeah.
changed from the default
Interesting.
CSS. Okay,
Oh,
sorry,
that's
I
okay.
interrupted you. So you're saying line
Yeah, where you've
17.
loaded the Sharingan
Yeah.
Themer package. Maybe that's why it could find something, was because we had loaded the package already. Okay, but what you'd want to do next, and I have to look at the website for this because I always forget, is there's several different functions that you could use. Where you can use one that's style underscore mono underscore accent. That's a function. And then what we would want to specify in there to change the font, for example, would be, let's see, header underscore font underscore Google equals Google underscore font.
Oops. Hold on. Sorry, I made a typo. Header underscore
Mm-hmm.
Google.
Header
Sorry, what was
underscore font
next?
underscore Google equals Google underscore font, and then open parentheses, and then you put in there the string of the font that you're interested in switching it to. So we can use the example Josephine or Josephine Sans. So it's JOSEFIN space SANS. So let's see if that will change it for us. And so that would only change the font of the header of our slides.
I see. So that's the header font Google. So maybe I should go down to
Mm-hmm.
here. Oh, I can see it changed it to what I
Yeah,
assume is
right.
Josephine
Yes.
Sands.
And then if you wanted to specify other fonts,
Cool.
there are additional parameters within that same function that you could change. And they're all really well documented on the website for the package.
Cool. And so this is using, if people aren't familiar, Google Fonts is just a repository of fonts that you can use, and there are, I don't even know how many, tons. So that's great. So we can really easily change the font. If I wanted to change not just the header font, but also the text
Mm-hmm.
font, so like if I look at this, did that
Yeah, so that
change?
I think when we loaded String Themer, there was like a little CSS loaded along with it, and that changed even though we hadn't specified anything in our chunk. So yeah, that font that you just highlighted is different than the standard Sharingan font. You're right.
But it's not the same as
Correct.
Josephine
No, I don't think it
Sans, or
is.
is
Uh-uh.
it? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if I want to change the body font, is there a
Yes. So
separate
the parameter
function
you'd
for that?
want for that, you'd add a comma. Yep, exactly. And then you'd say enter. And then the next parameter would be text underscore font underscore Google equals Google underscore font. And then similarly, you'd specify the font. So if you want to change it to the same one, then you would insert, yeah, Josephine Sans.
All right, so let me save that, go back
There
here.
we go. Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect, I can see that. So that's really easy. You just add a couple lines, specify what fonts you want, and looks like it kind of takes care of it from there, which definitely is easier for a lot of people, I think, than creating
Mm-hmm.
a bunch
Ooh,
of
but on
custom
that note,
CSS.
let's look at files. If you look at the files associated with this presentation, the package does create that, yeah, that Sharingan Themer CSS file. So if we open that file in the IDE, we can see, I think it's really well
Hmm,
commented in terms of what each of the different things are being tweaked.
I
And so
see.
it can be a nice place to go and learn about things if you want, because it's commented. But you can also say if you really
Yeah.
like, you spend some time picking colors and fonts and whatever, and you've got it the way you like using Sharingan Themer, you can always just copy the style sheet that the package just made, rename it to something else, and then link to it in any other presentation without having to
Hmm,
specify the code again if you don't want to. Um, yeah,
right,
which
right.
is a nice feature.
I see. So all the Sharingan themer package, what it's doing is just creating a CSS file that then Sharingan actually uses to create
Hmm.
the look and feel of the
Hmm.
slides that it generates. Cool. Um, and so I'm assuming it's really similar. So actually, just to highlight maybe first, it seems like you start with kind of like a default style, like an overall style mono accent, and then kind of tweak it from there. Is that right? Like, are there other, for example, if I type style
Hmm.
duo
Yeah, that
accent,
lets you pick two colors. So the
like,
mono accent function lets you pick one
I
color. If
see.
we wanted to change that, we would use that function to do it.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so
So
what you would
how does
enter
that
there,
work?
the parameter is base underscore color equals, and then you would specify a string with a hex code for a color that you like. So for example, in the documentation, the example they give is hashtag 1C5253, which is like a green
Five, two,
color. And
five,
so
three.
that should
Okay.
change the colors that we see in the slide deck. And every time we make one of these changes in that Sharingan Themer code chunk, it overrides the Sharingan Themer CSS file every time. So it's getting updated whenever we save it. Yeah, so that
Okay.
we can see that. Mm-hmm.
Ah, there we go. So I can see that kind of dark green.
Yeah, exactly. And then the
Cool.
inverse slide would also be that dark
Nice.
green.
Gotcha. So let's see, where, like here. I see. So it's made it dark
Mm-hmm.
green with the white text
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, and that's
Cool.
just like a basic.
That's
I
great.
think
That's
that's.
really helpful.
I mean, I was getting that code chunk from the main website for the package, so that's like a nice introductory example.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's a lot of other functions too.
Cool. I'll definitely post a link for people to check out Sharingan Themer because, as you said, it really is well documented and it's just a great way to easily kind of change the look and
I
feel
think it
of your
also, I haven't
slides.
used this myself, but it
Um,
also has the ability to help you style your plots also. Um, yeah, which yeah, like I
I
said, I
saw
haven't
that.
used that much myself, but it's an option.
Right, so then your plots will all be very consistent with the look and feel of your slides, which is really handy, makes you
Right.
look extra professional. Great. Was there anything we haven't showed with Sharingan that any other like tips or tricks you want to
Yeah, I
leave
would
people
say, I'm gonna look
with?
at my notes here. I would say one of the things that's really handy is changing the ratio of your slides. So what we're looking at here is the standard 4:3.
Hmm.
So if you go back up to the YAML, there's that section under nature with all the highlight stuff and incremental slide stuff. So we can add another line in there that is
Yep.
ratio colon, and then we can specify, say, 16:9, and that'll change it to widescreen, which is what I prefer to present in. That's a nice, yeah, that's a nice
Hmm.
way to, that's a
I
nice trick,
see.
I guess, for sharing good.
Oh, that's so easy to make that switch, and then you have a lot more space. Like if you want to do plot and code, they have a lot more
So
space
that's a
side
really
by
nice
side.
one. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, Sylvia, thank you so much for coming on, for sharing about Sharingan. Um, and I think this is going to be really helpful for folks who are interested in learning to make their presentations within R. If folks want to learn more about you, connect with you, what would be
Best
the
place
best
would be my
places to do
personal
that?
website, which is also made with R, and it's silviacanelon.com.
Okay, great. Well,
Thank you.
thanks,
You too.
Sylvia.
Thanks again
Appreciate it.
for
Have a good
inviting me
rest
to
of your day.
participate in this.